You have to create a vision and roadmap. You've got to know where you're going. Even if you don't follow it the whole way, that part doesn't matter, but you actually have to know kind of where you're going. So first thing is to write it down.
Welcome to Unstoppable Podcast with Harry Sardinas, inspiring conversations with influential millionaires, investors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs who are making a massive difference with their innovative products and services, and sharing the challenges and wisdom of how they sold their first million.
How would you like to achieve your first million? And today we have Steven, the founder of Iv20 Spirits. So Steven, tell us, what are the 5 steps to make your first million?
First, you have to create a vision and roadmap. You've got to know where you're going. Even if you don't follow it the whole way, that part doesn't matter, but you actually have to know kind of where you're going. So first thing is to write it down. You don't have to do a business plan. I'm not saying that, right? That's what a lot of the books and the professors will tell you. And you can end up wasting 2 years writing that plan and then end up throwing it in the trash, and we wasted a lot of time. That's not what I mean. But you can't also just go start something if you have no clue what you're doing. So the first step is to start figuring out what your plan is. So we call that a roadmap or your vision, right? So that first, what you're doing with that is you're trying to figure out what is it that you're going to sell. Is it a product, a market, a service, something, right? But you're going to have a segment where you're fitting into. We call that product market fit or service product fit, right? Service market fit. But that's the first thing, is you got to figure out kind of what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it, right? So that's where the roadmap part of this comes in. It's kind of looking forward. Hey, who needs what I'm doing and why do they need it, right? So that's how you create your value proposition. Step 2 is that you're going to actually map out all of the barriers. What are the things that are going to be the pitfalls that get in your way from where you are today to where you're going, right? So step 1 is like typing it in, right? That's like putting it into the GPS. You get in your car, you put in your destination, where you're going, but you have no clue how you're going to get there. But what happens along the way? There's a stoplight, there's a car accident, a tornado comes in, right? There could be any number of reasons, and then you've got that rerouting, right? And recalculating, right? So what we call that is the learning process. Test, build, measure, learn, iterate, repeat that process, right? So now now we're going into kind of step 3. So again, step 1, create your vision, figure out what you're trying to do. Step 2, document and map out all of your barriers, all of the things that could cause you problems along the way. And then as you start that journey, step 3 is this build, measure, learn kind of loop. You're going to do that over and over and over again as you're creating your processes, figuring out what's working, what's not working, and then you're documenting that. So that's the first 3 steps. Now, step 4, this one is done in parallel your entire process. You have to create content. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're mass market, you're tech, you're real estate, you're in finance, you're in R&D. It does not matter what industry you're in or who you're selling to, B2B, B2G, B2C. You have to create content. And whether that's just taking pictures of or your product or your prototype as you go, or just some things that you're learning, conferences that you're going to, people that you're meeting with, calls like this that you might be on, recording it, records that stuff along the way. That's for 2 reasons. 1, ultimately that content is going to be something that you can monetize. But secondly, that's how you're going to be documenting what you learn along the way. Okay, so that's step 4, is to create that the entire way along the process. Step 5 is how you plan to scale and go to market. And that whole piece is the actual, once you've actually built what you're going to build and you're ready to launch it, it's how do you launch it, how do you grow it, and how do you scale it. All of that is very similar to step 3. It's a build, measure, learn. You're getting stuff out, because first you're testing your product development. Then when you're ready to go to market, you're testing how to launch it into market. You're going to continually be getting a feedback loop. You're going to get your analytics. You're going to be getting your data. You're going to be measuring all of these different numbers, and it's going to tell you what to tweak, right? Turn this up a little bit, turn that down a little bit, what's working, what's not working. You can apply that to every facet of how you grow your business, whether it's scaling, partnering, vendor selection, a market approach, go-to-market strategy, even running ads and content and reading blogs and to different things. Whatever you might need to do to grow and scale your business, all of that stuff can be kind of done the same way. So those would be the 5 steps that I would say is you would want to follow to get your first million. Doesn't guarantee it, and you've got a million different ways that you can fail along that path. But those are the things that you need to make sure that you're paying attention to in order to kind of what we say stack the deck, right? It's a guarantee, but if you can turn what is normally a 5% success rate into a 6%, a 7%, right? Each one of those things, it gets you just a little bit more of edge.
So Steven, tell us how you end up becoming an entrepreneur. What happened?
I've been an entrepreneur since the 3rd grade, I think.
3rd grade? Tell us your first business venture.
My very first business was in grade school. Yeah, I would go around and actually collect up. So, kids might be playing baseball or soccer or basketball, and somebody might have a glove, but no ball. And somebody might have a ball, but no bat, right? And all of these things. So I would go around to all the neighborhood kids and I would collect all this stuff. And then I would display it out on my yard. And then I would rent it back out to the other neighborhood kids for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, to play baseball. Yeah, because you need the bat, you need the ball, you need gloves, you need everything.
And the second part about that is it helped build the community, right? Because
Absolutely.
I lived in a neighborhood where it was large, like almost farmland. So it was kind of spread out. Each house was half an acre to a couple acres. So this helped bring them together. Everybody meets each other. And we ended up playing a lot more sports and games and stuff, because of that. But no, I've starting businesses my whole life.
Yeah, but I want to know from the beginning of, like, for example, what was the reason? Your parents were entrepreneurs and you feel inspired, or basically you want to eat more candy and you were not allowed?
My parents were not entrepreneurs, but they were very hard workers. My mom was a first generation immigrant. And my dad is an engineer by being my mom a financial analyst. They're both very, very smart, educated people. And I think especially coming with that immigrant culture, my mom is Indian, so I'm Indian, half American, but that gets kind of sewn in, right? Of got to work hard. There's no shortcuts. It's follow the process. You've got to do it the right way. All of these things, it gets baked in. And even when I was a kid, when school would end for the summer, instead of me, just going home to sit on the couch and watch TV or go to the or whatever, my dad would literally stop at the bookstore, and I would have to pick out 5 textbooks for the summer, and then he would assign me homework, and I would be doing that on the side, and everything was to try and like I said earlier, it's all about getting a slight edge compared to what everybody else is doing, right? So it's to use the term called force multiplier. I used to be in the military, and that's a term I borrowed from the Army. But what are those tools and tricks and processes and things that you can add to your life that will make you, instead of having a normal 100% human output, now you can have 120%, 130%, the same time, right? The same amount of time. It's scaling your own life. It's adding scalability to who you are as a person.
Probably one of those books were talking about entrepreneur, and this would be a good idea about
maybe they were.
The stuff
yeah.
on Facebook, right?
But I always wanted to do something different, right? I didn't want to just, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I was in the military, and then I 15, 20 years working in the tech sector, and I raised over $100 million for other people. And I was like, why am I doing this? And then at the end of the day, it's not my business. I'm a millionaire. So if I have those skill sets, why not put those to work for myself? And I spent years, honing those skill sets, not only from being able to develop a product, but then being able to develop a business.
So tell us about your first business.
First actual business, right?
Yeah,
as an adult.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I got out of the military, I got a job. This was 2008 time frame, 2009. So we were in the
credit crunch.
Exactly. It was in the middle of one of and at that point, recessions and global is just becoming normal, right? Every 5 to 10 years, there's something that happens that just something. But at that time, I was getting out of the military.
Bad, right?
I'm sorry.
was very bad. People losing their homes and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, you never know. But coming out of the military back then, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be in the military any longer. I wanted to go into the business world, but specifically what industry, what aspect. I knew I had an engineering degree, so I had that technical, but I also, I felt called to business. I wanted to be involved in that, but I didn't want to just be a salesperson, because it is relatively easy to get a sales job, right? Almost anybody can at least get a shot in sales. It doesn't mean you're going to be good, right? or have it long term, but most anybody can at least get a chance. Now, whether that's selling pizza, selling toilet paper, selling securities, or
when
tech,
it comes to sales, there is always room for everybody. Yeah.
That's right. And so I got to this like tech startup, and I was working there, and I ended up building that company, from zero to a $20 million a year company in the government space. And then our board said, we don't want to do government anymore. We want to go commercial. So I had to rebuild it to a $5 million a year commercial company. And that's when COVID hit. And at that point in time, I was kind of at this point where it was like, you know what, I need to go do my own thing. And I had already been there for 10, 12, 15 years, something like that. And in the meantime, I had been taking, first of all, I did there that I convinced them to pay for my master's. So I went and got a master's degree in business. So now I had the technical undergrad, and then follow with the master's. And since I didn't have to pay for that because I convinced them to, and the only reason I did is because I was raising a lot of money for them, right? So at the end of the day, it's still about your value that you're providing. And if you want to get something, there's no cheat. You can't shortcut. I had to go do the work to then create the value so that then they would invest in me, and then I invest back in them, right? But in the meantime, I had been taking, every time I closed a big deal or I got a commission check or whatever, instead of going and spending that, right, or just throwing it somewhere, what I would do is I would go buy a house with it. Not a whole house. You can't. I wasn't getting $1 million commission checks, but I might get 20,000. I might get 30,000. I might get 15,000. I might get 40, and I would add those up.
Enough for the deposit, yeah.
Exactly. And so, time I was living somewhere, I would buy a house, and then I would put sweat equity into that house, right? I would renovate it. I would do my own stuff. I've done a lot of that kind of work. Being an engineer helps, right?
Oh yeah.
And then I would, instead of selling that house, what I would do is I would actually rent it out. So then I had somebody else living, paying my mortgage. I'm building equity. I'm building value. I'm learning business, right? I'm having relationships. I'm having all these things, right? And I did that until I had 4 or 5 houses. And then what I ended up doing is, you do that, and I'm not buying a house every year. It's 3 or 4 years, right? And then I'm renting it out so that I'm only having to carry it for a couple of months. Well, guess what? After 10 or 15 years, the first one's paid off. And so now I sell that house, and I take the cash and I do a 1031 exchange. And instead of buying another house, I go buy a multi-unit house, right? And then a couple of years later, that second one is now paid off. And then I go do the same thing. And so then I ended up flipping all these houses, and now I own, 7 or 8 multi-unit houses. So I went from 4 doors to now 12 doors. And then so what I ended up doing then is,
a multi-unit house will give you better cash flow, right?
100%. And so what I did is I changed that periodically over the course of 3 or 4 years. Absolutely. From an equity growth model to a cash flow model, right? So now it's spitting off cash for me to live off of, that I quit my day, that I can start my other 2 companies.
Absolutely.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential, audacious entrepreneurs that overcame challenges and adversity, providing you with the blueprint of how they sold their first million so you can grow your business exponentially.